So now we have a brief review of Chapter 6, Power and Politics. And for this chapter are, what are the distinct forms of power? How does the state distribute power in a society? Who has power in the United States today? The distinct, of course, um, really depend on your perspective. The one-dimensional view is that power is observable when one party prevails in a conflict, um, or for that matter, breaking the rules of the game may occur, and they use their power to influence the outcome of um, that game. Power is held by, in this country, the elite. Some people refute that, but people who have money and influence can also wield a lot of power. A two-dimensional view is different. Power to decide to get what's decided. So, for example, when Mitch McConnell, the leader, Senate leader, majority leader, refused to act on any of President Obama at the time, his appointments to the Supreme Court, he kept the agenda and decided who got interviewed and who didn't. And in his case, no one did. They get the power to set agendas, to manipulate and control what occurs. And they also deal with grievances of excluded or marginal groups, and they can decide to hear those or not hear those. Subordinate groups may not try to challenge because, not because they're not interested, but because they have no power. So with the Black Lives Matter movement, subordinate groups do challenge it because as things change in this country, and with the death of young black people, they feel this is an opportunity to have their voices heard, just like back in the 1960s and even before that. A three-dimensional view is even more different. Power always involves behavior. It can be caused without exercising it. And powerful people often attract others. So people like Nelson Mandela, his power was in his ability to attract his fellow South Africans. And there's power by persuasion, can be used to maintain the status quo. So people influencing other people to not change. Agenda setting occurs in politics and is very important. Why is it important? Because it actually happens to matter what gets done. The mass media influences politicians and policymakers through commercials, through Facebook and other social media ads, and of course influence what politicians take up to work with on their agendas. Subordinate individuals may desire change, but feel it is useful to try leading to inactivity. So subordinate individuals always have to deal with not having enough power in the situation to get anything done. This might be an example of, this might be with gun challenges back after school massacres. People that are subordinate don't really feel like they have the power to change, and even the children and young adults that came out, it led to, unfortunately, inactivity. When is power least visible? It's least visible, or the invisible power reflects the ability of the power holder to keep challenges from arising in the first place. This can be through the manipulation of social media, the manipulation of agendas, what gets talked about, for example, what the Supreme Court takes up as cases, influencing judges and the branches of government to do what they do. It's the capacity of power holders to convince subordinate groups that it is in their best interest to support the status quo. So commercials about a good economy and you might ask, who is it good for? Well, it's good for people that have jobs. It may not be good for people that are still looking for work. So they maintain the status quo. Question 2, how does the state distribute power in the Well, the state is in itself an interesting concept. It includes all formal political institutions, not only parties, but also the legal system in any society. So it includes the branches of government and the criminal justice system. It alters the balance of power among individuals, groups, and within society through policies and programs. So we live in a democratic republic with formal groups. Independent voters are Democratic and Republican voters, with a bicameral House and Senate, an executive branch, and a judiciary. It enforces contracts to help make a market economy work. So when, with COVID happening, the state was able to keep many institutions going by infusing money into them. How does the state regulate the economy? Well, laws and policies to prevent large corporations from driving small competitors out of business. Within the last year or so, there were some challenges to companies like Amazon monopolizing the market or Google for that matter, buying up smaller companies to influence the order of presentation on things like social media, the product or presentation. But because it's not an industry like the oil or rail industry, the policies really didn't apply to social media because this all came on the scene way too quickly. It prevents things like insider trading, which of course was what led to Martha Stewart being imprisoned for 4 months, I think it was. False advertising, making claims that you can't support. Unsafe work environments, like in meatpacking houses back in the turn of the last century. And of course, blocking of compensation for innocent third parties when corporate actions cause harm. An example of that might be when lawsuits were filed because of people claiming that Roundup insecticide or herbicide caused physical and emotional harm. So we regulate products to protect the public. Question 3, who has the power in the United States? Who wins policies and politics in the first dimension? What are the broad patterns buried into the day-to-day political conflicts and outcomes? They include tax policies, anti-poverty programs helping poor people. This is just 2 examples. What do tax policy tell us about how power is distributed in the United States? Well, the United States has a long-standing progressive income tax system. We don't have a flat tax. The more money you make, the more you're supposed to pay. Tax burdens on high earners have declined dramatically in the past 30 years, putting the burden on the middle class. Tax cuts on high earners appeared during the last at least 3 out of 4 administrations, including Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. And investment income and super rich and wealthy have often been sheltered through loopholes and tax breaks. Who writes the tax policies? Well, politicians do. Anti-poverty programs. We talked about this back in the chapter on inequity. Why is there so much child poverty in the United States? Well, hypothetically, poverty rates based just on market income from government action in countries with rates as high as those in the United States have lower actual poverty rates. And there's reasons for that. No country does as little to reduce poverty as the United States does, which sounds um, almost heretical in some ways. Who sets the agenda? Why are there only two political parties in America? Why does that matter? It's worth some thinking about, and maybe something we talk about during a Zoom meeting. Electoral system established by the Constitution makes it virtually impossible for a viable third party, although third parties can be spoilers in some ways. And even at that, the Electoral College system may, in fact, be something that's revisited in the near future. The lack of proportional representation do not allow minority parties to gain much representation at all. Money is a huge part of American politics. American politics are super expensive and get more and more expensive every election cycle. Most candidates supporting comes from wealthy individuals, large corporations, and political action committees. High spending media campaigns are most efficient way to reach voters nowadays. It used to be knocking door to door, passing leaflets out, some television and newspaper advertising, but now it's Twitter, Facebook, etc. The third dimension, of course, is American beliefs. Political systems favor preference for powerful. The rich should pay more taxes than the poor. These are some of the American belief system. Taxes are too high is another belief, and the government should spend more on social programs. So it's a matter of trying to juggle all of these together. And of course, the market is better at solving problems than the government is. So this belief system somehow becomes all distilled into what campaigns try to do to influence election outcomes. And you could argue with all five of these points. You could look at healthcare system. The percentage of people covered by healthcare peaked in the 1990s and has been a slow increase after a dip in 1994. And even things like real estate tax are issues that come up during election cycles. And then, of course, finally, what are some things that future investigations might look into? They include thinking about power and politics in three dimensions, creates a different way of thinking about political life, kind of like we talked about sociological imagination. The application of sociological imagination can be a useful tool for study of power. The study of power should be considered a central task for all sociology. And of course, power can be analyzed in terms of these three dimensions, and how they reinforce each other. Analysis is always the precursor for effective change. So making decisions based on legitimate and reasonable research into where the issues are.